Hey, Dog Pound, Browns backers, Browns fans, and hello to Bears fans and just football fans. This is the Oracle Speaks. I am the Village Elliot. I am your tour guide to the past, present, and future of the Cleveland Browns, and in this case, the Chicago Bears, the Browns' opponent on Sunday. That's tomorrow in my time as I'm recording. I want to tell you about what I think is going to happen tomorrow. And despite the title of this program, I do not claim to have magical powers or mystical insights, but I do use the tools of mathematics and statistics to gain insight into what might happen. I'd like to share that with you now. Let's talk about, first of all, the impact that defensive players can have upon a team. I think that the Chicago Bears might actually be bad news for the Cleveland Browns and the NFL in general, despite the fact that they were playing really poorly at the beginning of the season. They seem to have turned the corner and are playing well now. They've won 3 out of the past 4 games. And why is that? Well, I would point to the acquisition of Montez Sweat from the Washington team at the trade deadline. That seems to have been a very good move made by their new GM. That would be Ryan. Let's see, let me get it straight. They had 2 GMs. One is Ryan Pace, and the other one is Ryan Poles. Ryan Poles is the new guy. They both have kind of the same name, but I think he's been a really smart general manager so far. Ryan Pace made a lot of dumb trades where he traded away draft picks in order to get, these Superman players that never really panned out, never really turned the team around, and he just really depleted the Chicago Bears of draft capital as well as cap room space, and they never could really reach their potential, and they always blamed it on the quarterback. And so it was either going to be Mitch Trubisky's fault or it was Nick Foles' fault. But they didn't have an offensive line. They didn't have enough talent at wide receiver, and they never really went anyplace. And that's been their story, and that's still kind of the way that the tale is being written, where they have Justin Fields, who I think is a very good quarterback. They don't have a lot of talent around them, and they're sitting there with the first round draft pick that they got from the Carolina Panthers, and they're saying, oh man, we'd like to have a new quarterback. There's all these rookies that we think are just going to be so fantastic when they're drafted, and they're going to be sensational. It's just going to be so great to have a new quarterback. Why don't we get rid of Fields? He's no good. Even though he's one of the best two-way threats in the NFL, and he can throw for 300 yards. That's been proven. Even though he's been running for his life the whole time, he's just not had a good. I'm sorry to say, the Chicago Bears are not a good offensive football team. I think they're a team with a good quarterback. They have some talent at wide receiver and running back, but they're not a good, deep football team. And Justin Fields has been trying to do it really without enough help around him. And I think he's a really good quarterback. Anyway, I'm getting off track. What I really wanted to talk about was the defense and how important is the defense? How important is a defensive player to the football team? How important is the acquisition of Sweat, to the Montez Sweat? How important was he to the 2023 Chicago Bears defense? And I think it could be rather significant, and I think that I'm willing to believe that the Bears have become a much better than average defensive team in the second half of the season, and therefore they do pose a significant threat to the Cleveland Browns. And once again, I'm looking for and I say this every week, I'm looking for a defensive struggle. But this time, I think that it may come as a bit of a surprise how good the Chicago Bears actually are. All right, so let's talk about what the difference is between a good defense and a bad defense. And I think about football in numerical terms. What is a good defense? Well, an example of a good defense or a great defense would be the 1985 Chicago Bears, something like that, where they gave up about 12 points per game. 12 points per game. Then, at the same time, in the same year, the San Diego Chargers were a team that was able to score 467 points, and so there's a difference in differential between a team that has a really bad defense that gives up like 400 points a season, and a team like the Chicago Bears that's giving up right around 200 points per season, 12 points per game. So let's say 30 points per game versus 12 points in one season is like 18. Now the fact of the matter is that the Chicago Bears did not play Pro Bowl type players all the time. Sometimes they had to play backups due to injuries or whatnot, so they were not universally excellent. And similarly, on a bad team, I think the example of a bad team would be the 1981 Baltimore Colts, who gave up 533 points. That was 33 points per game. That was the worst in NFL history. And even then, the 81 Colts were not universally bad. They did have talent on that team. They just gave up a lot of points because they had enough bad players that they weighed them down. But I would say, okay, in this case, that was a 20-point differential. If they had only bad players on defense, let's add just a few more to make the math simple. Roughly a 22-point differential is not unreasonable between just good players and just bad players, or about 2 points per player. So 11 players on defense times 2, 22-point differential. So I think we can use that as an average between what the difference is between playing a good player at a position versus a bad player at a position. Now, some positions are worth more than others. We know, for example, and the NFL believes that defensive ends and cornerbacks get paid more than the other positions because they're worth more to the team. That's what the NFL believes, and I think that it's correct. The pass rushing defensive end is the most valuable player on defense, and so their point value is worth something like 3, maybe 4 points. And then a premier pass rusher like Myles Garrett or TJ Watt might be worth as much as 5 or 6 points per game to the defense. That means that they're probably worth as much as a quarterback. I think there's no question in my mind that Myles Garrett is worth that much to the Cleveland Browns, that without Myles Garrett, the other team is going to score about a touchdown more than they would when Myles Garrett is on the field and at his peak efficiency. There's that much difference. And if you have to play, especially if you have to play somebody that's below average. Now, in the Browns' case, they have had players that were actually pretty good, that were capable of starting on other teams. They've lost Obo Okoronkwo for the season, apparently, and that's going to make a big difference. Now, when they substitute for Myles Garrett, the drop-off is going to be much greater than it has been. So we'll have to see how that works out. But in any case, the point is that these defensive players are impact players. Traditionally, the the odds making community has downplayed the significance of injuries to defensive players, saying, they don't really matter that much. It won't show up in the point spread if does and so gets injured and so on. But I think, no, it's not really like that. If you look at the typical team, there's some good players that hold the score down and some bad players that boost the score up, and then they sort of average out and create a team that comes in at, let's say, 20 points per game given up on the average or something like that. But the good players are tending to keep the score down around 12 or so, and the bad players are tending to make the score kind of around 30, and they sort of even each other out. But if you look at the point value of an individual player, it does make a difference. There's something like 2 points, 3 points, 4 points for an individual player, one way or the other. That brings me to a side topic, is that I'd like to see an organization like Pro Football Focus try to estimate what the point value of each player is. Right now they have a grading system which is based on how well they think that players have carried out their assignments. And they say, oh, this is not saying how good the player is or how effective they are. It's just how well they carried out their assignment, whatever that means. So what are we supposed to do with that information, carrying out assignments? It's not really clear to me. What would be more helpful, more useful? I think what we'd really like to know is how much does each player actually influence the final score. I think that would be a much cooler thing to try to assess. It might be more difficult. It might be more embarrassing if they get it wrong. But nevertheless, I think that would be really how you should evaluate players, is what do they actually contribute to the team, and can you quantify that in terms of odds making or handicapping the game. All right, so that brings us back to the Montez Sweat trade that Ryan Poles pulled off at the trade deadline. And before we talk about Montez, let's take a break for commercials. We're very grateful for the fan support we've been getting, but on the other hand, we wouldn't be able to make these shows without our sponsors, so let's take a few seconds for a break. And we're back. So I hope that you buy all the products that were advertised, new cars and whatever else it is that we're selling. It's all good. And let's talk about Montez Sweat. I mentioned that the Chicago Bears had a heritage of really bad trades. They kept on trading draft picks for quarterbacks, and they also made a really big trade for superstar Khalil Mack, and Khalil Mack is still a superstar defensive lineman. But on the other hand, they couldn't afford to give up the draft picks, and they couldn't afford to give up the cap room in order to sign him and still build a team around him. They just didn't have, he wasn't a one-man team. He was very, very good, but he couldn't be a one-man team and do it all himself. And the Chicago Bears just were not able to build because they had so much invested in one player. They did the same thing with Mitch Trubisky. They moved up for him, traded away draft picks in order to move up for Justin Fields. In between, they also made a massive signing for Nick Foles just because they wanted to have somebody to compete with Mitch Trubisky, and then they decided they didn't like that either. And so they just wasted a lot of money on quarterbacks, wasted lots of draft picks, and so they finally decided that they would show Ryan Pace the door, and they brought in a new guy, Ryan Poles, and I think he's really got the team in the right direction. He did the right thing, I believe, by trading away their first-round draft pick last season, and they wound up with Carolina's first-round draft pick this season, which looks like it's probably going to be the first overall pick. Fans want to have another new quarterback, though I think they've got really a star quarterback in Justin Fields, and it would be foolish to give up on him at this point. But we'll see what they do. Who knows? I think it's an important decision. Hopefully they don't mess it up if the Chicago Bears don't want Justin Fields, I'll take him. If we can sign him at a backup quarterback rate, it would be awesome. I think he's a tremendous quarterback. Anyway, last season, one of the bad things that they did was that they made a trade for the kid from Pittsburgh, Chase Claypool, who was a talented wide receiver. He was big and could run real fast. Didn't catch the ball, and there are rumors that he had some personal issues that prevented him from achieving his his potential in Pittsburgh. So anyway, they traded a second-round draft pick for Claypool, even though he had only a year and a half remaining on his contract, and that was dumb. You can't trade away a second-round draft pick with 4 years of obligation to the team for a guy that has a year and a half and isn't really playing well anyhow. And if they'd have done their homework, they'd have found out that Claypool was rumored, let's say, to have off-the-field problems. So anyway, bad trade. They traded Claypool this season for a sixth-round draft pick in 2025, I think. So, they really took a hit in that deal. That was just a dumb trade. But on the other hand, I think they did get it right by trading away their number one draft pick and getting 2 number ones back, including first overall. What the heck? Not a bad deal. So this year, however, they decided that they would trade once again a number 2 draft pick, and they wound up with Montez Sweat, who is a premier pass rusher. And since they made that deal, there's been a noticeable improvement in the Chicago defense, and they've been playing like a much better unit. They've won. Montez Sweat has been available, playing for 5 games, and they've gone 3-2 in that span. And remember that they had only won 2 games up to that point, and so now they're 5-8, and yet they're playing at a somewhat above 500 level since he's been in the lineup, and he's really solidified the defensive line and made an impact. And I would say that it's very credible that a single defensive end can make a significant impact on the ability of the defense to hold down opposing offenses. Montez Sweat has got 3.5 sacks and has been pressuring other opposing quarterbacks on many of the pass plays, and the rest of the team has really been brought up to a higher level behind him. There's been a really good article that described that by Phil Rogers in Forbes.com. Forbes, of course, is a financial magazine, but they also have articles about the NFL, and they're just really playing well. I think it is a real effect. One possible mitigating factor is that on the other side of the defensive line, they lost Yannick Ngakoue, who you will remember, Browns fans, as a former Baltimore Raven, and he is out now. Although, if you believe Pro Football Focus, Ngakoue was not having a very good season overall, though the statistics say that he was leading the Bears in sacks when he went down. So take that for what it's worth. He's a solid veteran, and he's going to be replaced by a much lower rated backup player. The Pro Football Focus had described their front four as being composed of 3 defensive ends and 1 defensive tackle, and now they're saying that with Ngakwe out, they're going to move DeMarcus Walker out to his natural defensive end position, and Justin Jones will be the new defensive tackle, and he is not highly rated according to Pro Football Focus. So the Browns need to stay away from Sweat, and maybe they can do that now with Ngakwe not in the lineup. Run left behind Geron Christian and Joel Bitonio and see what happens. On the other hand, at cornerback, they have another guy playing at a superstar level, and that would be Jalen Johnson, the cornerback, and he's something like a top 3 player, and his job will be to go up against Amari Cooper. Maybe then the really key matchups are going to be Cedric Tillman against Tyreek Stevenson, who is not as highly rated over on the other side at cornerback. And then Njoku is going up against linebackers TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds. And he may get some safety help from Jaquan Brisker and Eddie Jackson. But those players are not at the same level as Njoku. So they may wind up double teaming Njoku and letting Jalen Johnson go one-on-one with Cooper. So, yeah, I think that's a good matchup. I think those are good matchups. I think that the Bears are going to be tough. I think that they're going to be sound on defense, like they haven't been for years. They were an atrocious defensive team last year, frankly, and they've been improving. And the key seems to have been the acquisition of Montez Sweat at the trade deadline. It seems like that has been a good deal, despite having made a bad deal last season with Chase Claypool. They went back and got some defense. What an idea! What a concept! The Bears also found out that at wide receiver, DJ Moore, their star wide receiver, was listed as questionable, but he had full practice, so he's going to be available. Tyler Scott on the other side is not nearly the same quality, so he'll be covered by probably Greg Newsome, and we may get some help there from Cameron Mitchell. I think the Browns match up well on defense as well. And one comment that I would have about the Bears on offense is that the Cleveland Browns with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah were built really, I think, to stop the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson. So I think they need to whip out their Baltimore Ravens defense and use that against Justin Fields. I think they'll be very well equipped to go up against Chicago. So I tend to, I've been messing up lately. I keep on saying it's going to be a low-scoring game and the defenses are going to star, and then what's been happening is that the Browns have gotten really good performances at the quarterback position from Joe Flacco, and they've run the ball well enough with Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt that they've been able to score points. And on the other hand, they've also given up some points on offense as well with turnovers, so the games have been relatively high scoring. So hopefully they can keep the turnovers to a minimum and prevent the Bears from accomplishing defensive scores. But it looks like both teams are well equipped to play defense, and so it's what I've been saying the past 2 weeks. I've been wrong in predicting the character of the game both times, but I still feel nevertheless that this Bears team is going to come to play defense, and they'll play well. And I also believe that the Browns defense matches up very well in order to stop Justin Fields. So we'll see how it goes. Can't wait for the game. I wrote an article about the ghosts of Jim Brown and Gale Sayers. I expect them to be in attendance. It's a team, both teams have a long legacy of incredible running backs. Those are the two biggest stars in our time, and certainly in my lifetime. I'm old enough to remember both Jim Brown and Gale Sayers, and I, in particular, remember the one game that Gale Sayers played in Cleveland Stadium. That was a big deal. It was the last 100-yard game of Gale Sayers' career. That happened back in 1969. So, looking forward to resuming that rivalry. Take care now. Hopefully, we'll chat again after the game, and go Browns.